Hi everyone, I'm Rob Hawkes.
I'm Chris Blackburn.
And as you know, we run Training Tuesdays every week, 4:30. At the moment though, with the coronavirus pandemic hitting the country and the world, we're going to be running Training Tuesdays remotely. Isn't that right, Chris?
That's correct. So everybody stay safe. We will still be ensuring that the training happens on a weekly basis, but we will be working remotely through that process too.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome everybody to Training Tuesdays. It is Tuesday, I've got to check the date, 14th of April 2020. Chris, how are you, sir?
Doing really well. Long Easter weekend, plenty of walking down the beach and productive 4 days, mate. So can't complain really. A different type of Easter.
Yeah,
as long as I can tell.
That's the main thing. Maybe those who are watching on Zoom, pop a little message in the chat. What'd you get up to on Easter? One thing that you did, which you're happy to admit you did on Easter. Not necessarily a large volume of Easter egg consumption, but just something positive inside of the chat. While we're waiting for that, let's go. So essentially, today is the second part of our 4-week series. Don't forget, if you're watching on Facebook or if you're watching on Zoom, you can like, share and subscribe on YouTube or even Vimeo. We're going to be covering our series on objection handling. So today is the second part of that. We've got a 4-step process in which we utilize for our objection handling. And today is relate. So we're really looking at the relationship side of things. But Chris, anything that's standing out from what we spoke about last week about objection handling that you want to sort of carry over to this week?
Yeah, I think, well, in an ideal world, like we said, objections, we wouldn't have to deal with them, but obviously the reality is that we do as well. So we just want to make sure today, as normal, is a very interactive session. So wherever you can, please pop questions in the chat that's relevant to yourself, and we'll try and answer them. We're trying to fit everything in within the sort of time that we've got sort of today. So as normal, the more that you give us, the more we can sort of give there. But as Rob was saying last week, what we covered was what objections are, the different types and examples, and when they predominantly come up within sales. And our first step of the process that we have called a RIO was the importance of appreciation. So as we know, if we don't get this right, the rest is kind of pointless, is really what we covered off last week. What would you say the big takeaway for yourself, Rob? What was the sort of message that you wanted to get out there?
I think the big thing for me was about the kind of
just on the thing
today is that empathetic side of things. Really genuinely stopping and listening to what people have got to say, especially my favorite phrase at the moment, now more than ever, is genuinely hearing what people have got to say. I think one of the key themes that we got from last week was there are all sorts of objections that we're still receiving right now, and it's important that we actually listen and take stock and genuinely appreciate their perspective, rather than just sort of gloss over it, ready for the next thing that we've got to say. So something that I took from our training last week. What about yourself?
Just in regards with it, for me, if you don't appreciate with somebody's objection or maybe a reason that they're not wishing to move forward now, it just means that it becomes less combative. So I think having that acknowledgement, repeating back what the customer said that we obviously covered off last week. So I think just being able to not have a combative objection handling where a lot of people try and overcome an objection without appreciating. So I think the takeaway for me was really making sure that it wasn't, an argumentative, sort of communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those on Facebook, if you just want to drop in there, if you can hear Chris, that'd be great. So for those watching on Facebook, just drop a yes or I can hear, just so that you guys can hear Chris. So it's not just one-sided as well. But a couple of things in there just from people. Just before we move on, we've got people swam in the ocean. We had a nice relaxed bit of basketball hoop, managed to make our house look lived in, sorted the balcony, built a shed from Bunnings. So I think there was about 1 million people headed to Bunnings this weekend. But I think on the whole, Australia seems to be doing quite well in regards to into COVID throughout the Christmas tree. Why not? So, okay, so what are we going to look at this week? We're going to look at relate. We're going to look at the importance of the second part of our objection handling process, relate. So how you relate to somebody. We're going to look at why that's important. So why relation is important. Excuse me, and then how to do it, but then also what to say. So we're going to cover some specific language patterns around what you can actually say. Obviously last week, as we highlighted, we went through some different language patterns, and we're going to be culminating in Ryan's full webinar on the full objection handling process. So for those of you who are in the academy, you'll be able to watch that one. For those of you who aren't, maybe have a look into that a little bit later on. But so that's our second part today. And Chris, I believe that you have a quote that you wanted to share. That's going to be a little thing of ours. We're going to give you a quote and then a recommendation of some reading. What's your quote for this week, Chris?
Yeah, so I was actually listening to Warren Buffett today because I think finances are quite important. And the big thing that I took away was price is what you pay, value is what you get. So price is what you pay, value is what you get. And I really love that, obviously, from a sales perspective, that it's not just about the price, it's the end, value that the customer's going to receive. So old
Warren. Do Australians call him Wazza?
Big was.
Big was. I don't know. Get maybe some nods or some yes in the chat. I don't know. I like to think that I'm down with what people are saying. Warren Buffett, Wazza. I don't know. Yes, love it. All right, good stuff. And the recommendation from myself is a kind of a book that probably a lot of you have read. I think Ian Andrews, you're on there as well. I think you've read probably every book under the sun. You'll agree with me on this one. Is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I dived back into it a week or so ago. Just purely because of the sequence that we've been doing, and I feel that it's still just as relevant as it was, when it was written. And I think that the importance of personalization and remembering things about people was really what I took from that. So that's my recommendation. I'm always really surprised when people haven't heard of that book. So maybe there's a few in there that haven't. So that's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a timeless classic. Absolutely, Ian. So, so for me, that's my little nugget for you to move into. But Chris, you had something that you wanted to say before we get into the content.
So if everyone can obviously get pens and paper at the ready, I think the importance with anything is really understanding the content we're going to cover and why that is, sort of applicable to everybody. And for me, Mandy, I know that we see you in every training session. We love your commitment and everything that you're doing. But for me, when me and Rob were discussing on, sort of things that we'd like to cover today and how we've related to people, it was yourself that kind of came up for me personally. So I hope you don't mind sharing. But I believe that when you can relate to a customer, whether it is, in rapport building around their personal circumstances, their family, things like that, me and Mandy was able to relate on common ground due to the fact both of our partners have the same name. Mine's female, Mandy's is male, but they still had the same name. So we built a lot of common ground when we were relating and understanding that, Mandy's journey, I could kind of relate with where she was at in an industry and sort of specific too. So I think understanding the customer is obviously very important as well, as I'm sure you can appreciate, Rob.
Yeah, we got who else we got in this? Sam Stark. Hey Sam, we connected really well. We related really well, I think, when you first reached out to us. And I think everyone in here who's a client of ours, which there are some that aren't, but we would have related to you in some way, shape, or form. And I think that it all comes down to that people buy people ultimately. We say it every week, and it's 100%. Thanks, Sam. So if we can't relate to somebody, then the whole sales conversation is almost irrelevant, because if we're not feeling like we're connecting with somebody on that behalf, then then everything else doesn't really matter. So we really want to hammer home on, after we've appreciated, going back to objection handling, after we've appreciated the the issue or the reason for not moving forwards, this is where we add in that relate. And Chris, I believe that you've come up with something that might help people when relating. A bit of an acronym for those acronym lovers out there.
We know we love an acronym. So yeah, let's get into the content then. So if everybody can get pen and papers at the ready, and let's get into this. So as Rob was saying, there's after you appreciated or sort of acknowledged the customer's objection. Again, we look at smoke screens, and sometimes, well, 95% of the time you will get the reason that sounds good, not the real reason. What we need to do then is actually build rapport within our relation. So if we're taking notes as well, I just want you to write this acronym down for me. It's an 8-step process that I've personally used for, well, years now to be able to relate to the customer. And it stands for sub-frame. So if Rob can put that in the chat. We speak a lot about framing of conversations, but this for me is around a rapport building tool. So if you can start to sub-frame before you try and overcome the objection, if you are overcoming the right objection, of course, this hopefully will just help with some practicals in there as well. So the first S stands for speak in specifics.
First S, is only one S?
Correct. So the only one S is speak in specifics.
Yeah. First and only S. Speak in specifics.
Yeah. So that's where you want to give a lot of clarity to the customer as well. The U stands for understand what's not being said. So if you're relating with a particular customer, you really want to understand if there's anything that you have missed. You know, people want to know that other people have been through this before. So before you relate to a customer, you really want to understand that you're relating on common ground with them. So the second one is understand what's not been said. The B stands for, as we always are, is be a subject matter expert. So be an expert in your field. We know that's a way to make a winning first impression with a customer. But if somebody's going to do business with you, they need to know that they're dealing with an expert as well.
Just on that, in terms of relations, so be a subject matter expert, which is an expert in your field, as we say. If I'm relating to an objection, how would I do that to show? How would I show that I'm a subject matter expert when we relate through a first or third party story, for example?
That was kind of the answer I'd give there halfway through. So through first and third party stories is how you become an expert. It shows the experience you've got, that the people that you've assisted through the similar challenge that the customer's facing potentially at the moment as well. For me in the relation, just again, maybe on a side note, this just gives an opportunity to lend more value on all three factors that anybody purchases any product or service from. That's you, the individual, as Rob said, people by people, the company, the organization they're going to do business with, and the products and services that they're buying into. So if you're an industry expert or a product expert, whatever industry you're in, that's when they're going to want to do business with you, when you can relate through a third and first party story.
So if someone had an objection or a reason to not move forwards, and you overcame that with logic or some sort of industry specific reasoning as to why they should move forwards, would you agree that that would be lending yourself to be an expert in your field?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what do we got to? SUB, what's F?
F, it stands for full attention. So as we said within appreciation, we more or less respond the same objection back to the customer to let them know that we're actually listening. So to pay the full attention, that's what people are going to buy into. So the F is for full attention.
Can I just ask a question in the chat here? For those of you who are working from home, who would admit that when on a call, you have not given your customer the full attention? In fact, you don't have to, I was going to say you don't have to, but yeah.
Yeah. Even when you get that text message, that email, social media goes on.
Yeah. So you can miss things if you're not giving them your full attention. Somebody might give you a reasoning and you might have, you might have missed something based on the fact that we were looking elsewhere, or, it's difficult when you've got the dog barking or when you've got your kids at your nipping at your ankles, but full attention to be able to relate fully, especially if you can use what they were saying as an, so actually by repeating back or mentioning, I can understand that and actually repeat back. I think we covered that last week, didn't we, Chris? We said about actually acknowledging and repeating back. That means that you were listening. So full attention. I'm definitely guilty of not doing that.
Yeah.
In the office.
The next one then, the R stands for read body language. As we know, 9/10 of our communication is delivered through tone and body language. So not just the words that we're saying, but understand their body language if we're on a Zoom communication, and obviously controlling your own as well would be another note I'd take. Make sure we're controlling our own. But if you're in a face-to-face sales, even though we're doing it virtually, as Ryan covered off, sales through video calls the other week as well, it's really important to read somebody's body language. I'm looking at Rob at the moment, arms crossed, like that. If we was in a sort of sales communication, I'd be sort of reading all that and seeing where Rob's at, throughout that.
But that would be different to that.
Yeah.
Because that's like, I'm bored. I'm like swinging my chair. So that would be like, I'm not really listening. Whereas if I'm, okay. So
more engaged.
Yeah. All right. And we can obviously, with the people that have got the screens on, we can see how engaged people are, and understanding that as well, which is good. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. The next one, the A, that will stand for active listening. We've touched on this a few times now, not interrupting the customer. And just making sure that when we're relating and we're asking effective questions, that we're actively listening to their response. So that kind of falls into the full attention framework, obviously inside there as well, but be actively listening when you're relating with a customer. The M, should I say, stands for mastering your tone of voice. So again, we've touched on that with the body language and tone, but if you're in a phone communication, 9/10 of your communication is delivered through the tone of your voice. So being able to master that, dropping into the right tone. Sorry,
like sort of like subtle nuances of it as well, though. I think is especially when someone's giving you an objection, like we spoke about last week around about understanding buying signals versus objections. Mm-hmm. So also in the way that someone's delivering that objection to you will give you a better understanding as to whether where they're at, so if someone's like saying, I really, really do think I need to talk to my partner about this. The way that they would be straining their voice would suggest that actually that could be genuine. But if someone went, I don't know, like probably just run it past my partner and get back to you, I'll be like, all right, maybe that's not the real reason. So do you find that, Chris, like that you, someone can say something that they mean something else, especially when they're about to give you an objection or giving you?
100%. That leads into the last one, the E, and that stands for empathetic. We have to make sure that, again, when we're relating, the best thing to do with anything is obviously just the customer needs to know that they're dealing with a human, right? They need to know that they're dealing with a person that's not in there just to make a commission, just to make a sale. Again, swish, selling with integrity, selling honestly. We've got to make sure that we're very empathetic with customers' responses. So as Rob's touched on there, if the customer's tone is obviously very genuine, maybe that sort of, where you're trying to understand if it is the real objection with the customer, you have to be empathetic around it to make sure that, especially with what's going off in the world, that we're thinking of people's, feelings and everything like that.
So empathy and compassion in the relation elements are a key. I suppose when relating, we spoke about using a third party story, we've spoken about using a first party story, but truly getting it, truly saying, okay, look, I completely understand that times are hard right now. Our customers of ours or people that we know have, and actually genuinely relating to that. I think where a lot of people would suggest that they've had interesting responses from us would be in our first party references. I think that's really where you buy that person, because I wouldn't buy off of someone else's experience. I would probably buy more so based on the individual. Mm-hmm. So there's a fine line between Yeah, first and third party. Sorry, we just had a couple of people on the chat. The M stands for master the nuance of voice tones. So master the nuance of voice tones, and then E is empathy. So just to clear that up.
I think just touching on what you said there, Rob, as well, just while people are obviously taking notes, maybe some language patterns. I think when you relate to a customer, when you're very personable to them, you know, like you sound very similar to, or you remind me of, before you run into a third party story, again, just goes back to yourself being that expert in your field, shows that you've helped multiple people with the same objection, and just gives that ability to build more value as well. So little lines like, you know, that's obviously really funny. Actually, you do remind me of X. And then when you actually walk them through the story on how you assisted that person and where they've ended up 3 to 6 months later, that's coming into the overcome side that we'll obviously touch on in a couple of weeks as well. But obviously relating through a first and third party story will also set up the overcoming of the objection too.
Yeah. Something that we mentioned before about in the overall side of things, not sounding too salesy. There is a danger that when we do say, oh, well, you remind me of X and Y, we've got to be very careful that it doesn't come across, especially right this minute when somebody says, look, I'll do it in a few months, or I'll do it in a year when the coronavirus has passed. Obviously, it's an easy way to relate to suggest that, you sound like every other person in the world right now. But it's important to personalize that response. I get it. I understand that, there's a lot to consider at the moment, especially while funds are tight. Some people might have been brought on board where we've used the phrase, so, the finances are there, but you're just being a little bit cautious right now. Would that be fair? And that actually, through a relation of, I remember doing the same when I came through ISR. I didn't have any money. I used a credit card, and just leaving it there. Sometimes people go, oh no, well, I've got a credit card, or oh, I have, but I am just being a little bit, I'm being a little bit cautious because, I'm uncertain around what's going on. And to genuinely relate and say, yeah, like, of course, I understand that. It's a testing time out there. But actually going deeper, not just surface levelly going, oh yeah, actually by saying, oh, I get it. I'm going through the same. My family, or my home life, or my mother, my father. I've spoken a lot today about Amy, my wife's grandfather. He's in his 90s. He's got coronavirus in a care home. That sort of relation to the current situation just goes a little bit deeper, which suggests that I am empathetic towards your situation, and I'm also a real person who's also going through those challenges. Yet in the same breath, I've still got that level of understanding, but I've also got a job to do. And that's kind of really where we want to bring in that transition for next week when we go into isolation, which is where we isolate the problem. It'll be important that we really do genuinely connect with our prospects to show that, as Chris said earlier, it's not just about making a sale, or it's not just about getting one over someone or anything like that. It's like I genuinely understand it. You're a person, I'm a person. Let's continue to have this conversation because I genuinely believe in the product or the service that I provide. Therefore, I'd like to continue the conversation. That's kind of what you're saying when you're relating. The conversation's not done at that point. It's almost like it's only just getting started.
And obviously what Rob went through there was a very powerful first party story regarding his journey through to ISR. So if he ever spoke to somebody that's there, maybe, and again, you've got to understand whether you're going to build rapport on a social and on a professional level. It really depends. Rob's gone more on a social level there for somebody that may not have invested into their own future before, into their own personal development. And Rob can really just go genuine human to human and just let them know that they're not alone. They're not the first person that's, taken a step to invest in themselves, and he can relate through his journey. 5 years later, he's now the head of coaching for ISR. He's now sponsored in the country. He has a family that are getting brought here. So Rob can sort of take people through a 5-year journey and let them know what they could do to get the outcome that Rob achieved, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's good. What about for, you know, when we've had objections where people have spoken about price, how do you relate to that? Because the quote that you mentioned earlier from Warren Buffett around, I'm going to scroll back through, what was it? Price is what you pay, value is what you get. How do you relate to somebody who has potentially given forward a price objection? How do you overcome, or how do you relate to that?
Yeah, that's a good. I'd probably relate through a third-party story there, because I think, you know, knowing that there's other businesses, and again, it's relative to the industry. I think that's a hard question to give a genuine specific, just because, you know, the investment can be, you know, a couple of grand, it could be a couple of million. So it really depends on who you're speaking to and what products and service that they're buying into. But I think being able to relate, and again, to build more value, that's the reason I wanted to give that quote today, because it's not the price, it's the value that the customer needs to get. So if you generally believe that, you know, I know Daniel's in here too, you know, you're selling a Mercedes-Benz car as an example. If you believe the customer is going to get the value from that Mercedes, then it's about going through the relevant professional third-party story that helps them see the value in that as well. So it's really hard to give a specific there, Rob, but I think it's just making sure that you can build more value against one of the three areas that they're not bought into yet. Either me, the individual, they don't believe what I'm saying, the company, the organization that I represent, or the products and services I'm offering. So I need to make sure which one of the three doesn't have enough value in there at the moment.
Yeah. And that's what we'll say next week. We'll cover the isolation. So how we can isolate which of those are to the real reason versus the reason that sounds good. We know, as you know, as anything, if the value is there, then we'll find a way. I mean, you've just said, a couple of weeks ago, you've you know, invested in a visa and you're moving house. Like, these are all things that I imagine there are a lot of people will have in that industry. They would have come across as objections. You know, I'll wait to move, or I'll wait to do that. So I think by understanding that you've actually taken that upon yourself to use this as a reason to do it, shows that if your inherent why is there enough, you'll actually find a way. And I
think that's a prime example. Like, the two things that I'm personally going through is, as Rob shared there, is going through real estate. So moving home in 5 weeks. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I've decided to do it. And move on to a new visa where I'm actually bringing my partner Ellis over to mine. So the reason that I've transacted with these companies as well is because, and again, for notes, they've listened to my needs. They understand what Rob's just touched on there. They understand my why. They know the reason why this is so important to me now. So if I came up with an objection of, you know, I'll do that visa process in the next 3 months, they can then explain through a third or first party story of somebody else that gave that objection and what they found by not taking action, as opposed to the person taking action and then becoming a resident in this country. So she was able to explain that, and I was like, I'm in. You know, I need to get this done.
And why wouldn't she? You know, that's doing you a disservice if that explanation wasn't made. Correct. We always talk about integrity is, you know, it's about doing the right thing. If you genuinely, hand on heart, believe that someone can benefit, you should at least give them you know, more opportunity to see the full picture. So if you're not giving them the opportunity to see that through other people's experiences, then, you know, then you're doing them a disservice. Especially at the moment, there are a lot of people that are worried or concerned about what's going on. So, you know, be a thought leader, be someone who's confident enough to say, well, do you know what? If you use what we have, you will get this result. And I'm confident that, you know, based on the fact that somebody went through the same thing that you did, we will be able to help you. And actually asking them, does that help? You know, does that make you feel like we can help you? And actually, you know, asking them the question after you've delivered that information, see whether, you know, ask them whether it makes them feel better about it. Mm-hmm. Because if they don't, then we've got to build more value. And like you said earlier, Chris, that, you know, when we do get an objection, it's a chance to build more value. You know, for those of you who are in the academy, you know, make sure you go to the feature and benefit grid webinar that Ryan did. Go in and build your own feature and benefit grid of the product yourself and the company. Build those third-party story references so that you can be ready, so that when somebody does say, oh, I'm not sure, or, I'm really, maybe they're on the fence, that's your time to obtain them. We talk about buyers motivated to buy. Those motivated buyers need a little bit of encouragement or a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. And that's our job as the professional to provide that. There's a reason why, people will look at, like we spoke about, reviews and testimonials and videos, because we need that level of encouragement to know that the decision that we're making is the right one. And if the person on the other end of the phone or conversation or Zoom, in response to, I'm not really sure, I kind of probably I want to go and think about it. And we go, oh, all right, okay. It's like, well, geez, they're not confident in what they have. I'm not saying, we're not saying be pushy or push it on someone, but, in this current climate, an extra 5 or 10 minutes to truly understand why they're not sure or why they need more time and relate to that is going to massively impact the results that you get in sales, especially moving out of COVID-19, whenever that does arise. So the importance of being able to relate is massive. So let's have that bank of content that we can use, stories and understanding of people, genuinely be empathetic, use that 8-step process that Chris spoke about before, and really sort of hammer home as to how we can understand people's needs. I agree.
And obviously we've got, the reason that me and Rob are going through this 4-step process now is as well on the link up to Ryan Tuckwood, our CEO, his webinar next month. He's going to go through a 1-hour session covering things like the tone and going really deep into personality profiling. We know that the content we're giving, it really depends on your industry, who you're speaking to. You may have a sales cycle of 1 day, you may have a sales cycle of 1 year. So it really depends on your business, obviously. So Ryan's going to run into that next month. So if you can, find the time, I'd highly recommend to jump into that session.
Absolutely. So today we've covered kind of what relation is, how we relate to it, and some reasons as to, obviously, some language patterns as to how to do that, and obviously the why behind it. Hopefully that's been helpful today. We just had a question, which is, please confirm the date of that webinar with Ryan. So while I'm doing that, Chris, I can tell you it is on the 8th of May at 2 p.m. So the 8th of May, 2 p.m. That's if you're in the academy. If you have the exclusive or the premium version. If not, I believe they're about $80 or something like that for the webinar. If that makes sense. Chris, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, perfect. Well, as normal, thank you everybody for taking your time out of your short week to listen to myself and Rob. Again, this will all be recorded, uploaded into your academy, so just jump back into that as well. As some of you may have seen as well, starting on Monday, for any business out there or individual sales professional, we're running a 14-day complimentary trial. It's the first time we've ever done it where people go into a 14-day challenge with ISR training. So if you want to obviously jump onto that, it starts on Monday with Ryan, and that's going to really create some effective habits. What I'll do is pop the link into the chat section. There you go. If you want to click into that, go and register. It'll be an exciting couple of weeks as well. But apart from that, we look forward to seeing you next week when we go through isolating objections and making sure we're overcoming the right one.
Just on that as well, Chris, just before we finish. So that's a video every day, plus an invitation into a private Facebook group. After this, it's going to be about $100, $97 that these 14-day challenges are going to be. Because this is the first one we're doing, it's going to be free. So regardless of whether you're in the academy or you're not, feel free to register, and you can jump in and you'll receive information every day. and bits from Ryan. It's going to be pretty cool. So it's like a 14-day challenge. So even if you are in that, if you're on Facebook and you're wanting to join that, then that will be shared later on today. The link will go out, and you've got until midnight on Sunday to register for it complimentary. And again, if you know of anybody who would benefit from 14 days of completely free sales training, please feel free to share that with them, and they'll be able to register using that link. If it goes too quickly or you haven't had a chance to register, then feel free to just reach out to us on Messenger or on Facebook Live or on the chat, carrier pigeon, whatever it is that you want to reach out to us to. If there's a will, there's a way. Thank you so much for your time. We're 5 minutes over, so I hope everybody enjoys their Tuesday evening. Happy Easter. Is it happy belated Easter? I don't know if that works, but yeah, retrospectively wishing everybody a fantastic Easter, and hope you guys have a great week. Chris, always a pleasure, mate. Never a chore.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Catch you all soon. See ya.
Thank you for everybody taking your time today to watch Training Tuesdays. Apologies that we weren't together as we normally are, but we'll be back next Tuesday at the same time, same place.